Hello my retards and welcome back to the Magic Kool-Aid. Our next segment is a long-awaited and much requested segment on Teal Swan. That's right, she's about to swan dive into a lot of bullshit, okay? And I have watched some videos from Teal Swan before. I wasn't particularly impressed, but at the same time, I didn't just see a complete retard who I could easily eviscerate. A few short months ago, I didn't realize just how sad some of these people can be, or rather their followers. I didn't realize to what extent some people will go when they are pushed by a predatory sociopath. But now, I see that it's not a fucking joke. It's not a laughing matter. And if you get duped by one of these people, you may deserve it on some level. And then on some level, you're also being preyed upon for your own naivety and ignorance. And that can't be allowed to stand. And what really got me fired up about Miss Teal Swan is I read a few posts about her. And I read about someone named Cameron Clark who lived with Teal Swan and described various horrific things that happened while they lived together, including Teal urging her to kill herself. Now, I'm just going to read this short quote before we watch Teal's video because it's pertinent to the video that we are going to watch, which is called "Do People Who Commit Suicide Go to Hell?" episode about suicide. And as you'll find out in a moment, she recorded this video 6 days after one of her clients killed herself. This client, by the way, may have been given some very questionable advice about suicide by Teal Swan. So let's read this comment. I want you to know, this is a comment that I found on the internet. So if you want to look up this Cameron person, be my guest, judge the credibility of this for yourself, but we're going to watch the video of Teal speaking about suicide, and I think we can judge after whether she's telling the truth, you know? So let's read this comment. It caught me off guard the first time I experienced one of Teal's borderline tirades where she flipped a switch and began berating me for all my shortcomings a few weeks after I arrived in Utah. It started when she became extremely irritated with me and accused me of questioning her integrity, after she told me her cat Cosmos was actually a holographic soul projection from the planet Sirius, and that he had been talking to me and telling me that my blood sugar was off. So, we'll skip ahead a little bit, but it turns out that Teal has this spiel, it's called the Teal spiel, where she tells people that they are passively suicidal, uncommitted to life, if they don't listen to her advice. So if you don't listen to what Teal says, she says, you don't really want to live, do you? You really need to think about whether or not you want to be alive. She even went ahead and asked Cameron here why she had never considered suicide. Now, why would someone who's a spiritual healer say, why haven't you considered killing yourself before? And then she tells her that she should consider it and that she should take a drive to consider whether or not she really wants to be alive. So interesting. And then Cameron mentions this woman, Leslie, who did kill herself. And as we go a little further down here, this video was put out 6 days after this Leslie woman killed herself. Let's see what Teal has to say. Ask Teal. Give us a Teal spiel. Let's do it.
Today we're going to broach a taboo subject which is drowned in stigma. What we're going to be talking about today is suicide.
Okay.
Suicide is an action which is the byproduct of the feeling of total powerlessness.
Right.
It occurs when someone has focused on negative thoughts for so long or with such intensity that they become cut off from who they really are.
Yeah. Teal, I'm just curious, based on the story I just read about you and Cameron and this Leslie lady, do you implant negative thoughts into people's heads to make them feel suicidal? I'm not saying you do. I'm just asking if you do, based on allegations made by various people connected with you. Just asking. So calm down.
Positive vibrations from their desires. Source energy is therefore prevented from flowing through them by them.
What's up with these images?
And
it's
as
kind of
such,
creepy.
they feel as if they are in a chasm so absent of light that there is no way out. There is no light at the end of the tunnel.
Are you listening? Or
there's no way
Fuck
out of
that
that
one up.
dark.
I'll just let that one go into my cutting room floor.
Intuitively, we all know that Source is pure positive vibration. So intuitively, we all know that to die is to reemerge with that pure positive vibration.
So that's not exactly true. First, you said dutifully we know that Source is positive vibration. That's retarded, okay? Now, I'm not as spiritual as you are, but it seems to me that the Source would be all-encompassing of all things. And so therefore, the Source would encompass both negative and positive aspects of existence. So your first mistake is telling everybody that the truth is all positivity and light, when in fact that's not actually true. And your second incorrect statement is that we all intuitively know that if we die, we'll simply reemerge somewhere else. That's also not true. The only safe premise to operate under in regard to suicide is that once you're dead, you're fucking gone, and you've wasted your life, and you hurt all of those people who knew you and loved you and wanted you to be happy. Maybe that's the point. Maybe that's why people kill themselves. But you reinforcing this idea that we will simply reemerge into some sphere of light after we kill ourselves is dangerous, because what you're telling suicidal people is that it's no big fucking deal if they kill themselves. It is a big deal, and it's also a big deal for you to be telling people that, all right? It's not fucking right, and I think it needs a little more scrutiny. Wouldn't you agree, everybody who's not Teal Swan?
We know that it is relief. And so from that perspective,
Suicide is relief?
like I was talking about earlier, that perspective that there is no light at the end of the tunnel, it seems like the only option. To most people, the process of exiting this life into death seems like jumping off of a giant cliff. It seems like a lot of risk. But when you're in that kind of a chasm where life is so dark to you, that doesn't seem like much of a risk. So instead of jumping off of a cliff, it feels a little bit more like jumping off of a rock.
Okay.
What suicide is pushing the reset button.
It's not. Another fucking problem here, okay? You cannot say that suicide is pushing the reset button. How dare you diminish people's lives in such a way that you say that them killing themselves is simply pushing the reset button. It is not. It is the ending of their entire existence. It is the snuffing out of what made them in the first place. They don't simply get to start over and go live in some new life with a new opportunity to make things right. That's not how it works. When people are dead, they are fucking dead. And there are repercussions. And people's lives are affected by it. So it is irresponsible and in fact evil of you to tell people that killing yourself is pushing the reset button. That's not true, and it's repugnant.
It's not a good or bad decision in and of
It's
itself.
a bad decision. How is a spiritual healer going to tell people out there killing yourself could be a good decision? Who knows? How come you're not locked up? You know, the reason you don't have a license is because you could never get licensed for what you're doing when you're telling people that killing themselves is a neutral option.
It's not something that Source either condones or condemns.
Source doesn't have a fucking opinion about anything. It's simply the whole of existence. It doesn't have a consciousness. It doesn't make decisions. And you know what? You don't speak for it. You're not an authority figure. You're a charlatan. You're a fraud. And you're a danger to society, telling suicidal people that maybe it's fine for them to kill themselves.
You cannot
How
say
many
this.
people in your life have you told that to? And how many of them have actually done it? I'm just curious.
Suicide is wrong without also saying that death is wrong. Death is always a choice.
No, it's not.
You
Death is not always a choice. Murder victims don't choose to be murdered. People who get decapitated aren't choosing to be decapitated. And you know what? A lot of times people do choose to kill themselves, but it's because twisted sociopaths were brainwashing them and implanting these negative thoughts in order specifically to drive them through it in order to empower themselves, because they are in fact nothing more than disgusting psychic vampires.
choose not to participate.
And I can
in the
see
same
them.
way as you
I can
chose
spot
to
them from a
participate
mile
in the first
away. I
place.
know what they are. I know what they look like
Because
and
you are two
talk
points
like.
of perspective. What I mean by this is every single death on this earth could be seen as a suicide.
No.
Because
Every single death could not be seen as a suicide. You have no understanding of death, do you? I mean, either you're lying, or you're insane, or both. Which is it? Why would suicide and death actually be two different words if they could be viewed as the same thing? One involves choice and the other doesn't, okay? Suicide and dying in a car wreck, not the same thing.
in order to die, your individual perspective has to align with your higher self perspective.
No.
In order to die.
That's not true.
Basically, when your source energy is pulling back from you, back into non-physical perspective.
Do you guys see the insidious evil of this? Do you see how someone who speaks this way and who is clearly not on drugs, someone who is focused, do you see the threat they can present to society? Do you see how they can work their dark little fingers into people's brains and twist them against themselves? You see that this is self-destructive? This is a dead end for evolution? We cannot allow this to happen. We cannot allow people like this to walk around and poison the weakest members of our society, the most vulnerable. We cannot allow predators to operate in the open. This needs to be called out. We can't let someone tell everybody that suicide is a reasonable thing to do.
You have to align with that decision. This is
Well,
why a lot
I guess
of
it
people
depends
may end
on
up
who
in
you
comas.
are.
What a coma is somebody deciding whether to stay or whether to align with death.
That's not what a coma is. Why don't you ask a fucking doctor what a coma is?
So, death is always a choice.
Are you going to ask a doctor, or are you going to ask Teal Swan what a coma is? Can I see your certifications, Miss Swan?
Regardless of whether you're in an accident and you weren't necessarily intending to die in the first place, or whether you choose to take your death into your own hands and commit suicide.
Okay.
We who are left behind in the wake of grief find it very easy to jump.
I would like to see what grief looks like for her, because I have a feeling it looks very similar to what we're seeing right now.
To advise against suicide. We jump to say that it's wrong.
We shouldn't advise against suicide. We shouldn't say that suicide is wrong. It's actually great!
Which is the
You're
same as
sick in
saying
the
that
head,
we know better
Teal.
what is and isn't right for somebody than they know, which just isn't true. Those
Shame
of us
on you.
who resist the lower
Shame on
vibrational
you.
decisions like suicide.
Not only have you ruined the lives of people who took your shitty advice, you ruined the lives of all the people who cared for them and wanted them to be happy and wanted to help them. You ruined the lives of their family members. You ruined the lives of their friends. When they take your advice, Teal, there are real repercussions. There are real effects, and they're not good. It's not good.
Suicide suffer every bit as much as
Existing is better than not existing, all right? It's very simple.
those who embrace them. But what we need to do instead is really to allow. We need to allow
The fuck is this
like
disgusting
suicide,
image?
while simultaneously
We need to
focusing on
allow suicide. Society should allow suicide, guys. We should encourage it as a way of life. Because you know what? Our species wants to fucking die. This is the end of evolution. I keep saying it. It's a fucking recurring theme to me. There are people out there telling us that we should kill ourselves, and then there are people supporting those people. Do we really just want to die as a species? Is that how bad we are now? Is that how sick and twisted and corrupt we've become? That we're going to let this be normal now?
we would prefer. Obviously, what we would prefer is for somebody to move through life hand in hand with joy.
Not you, though.
There are no consequences for those who commit suicide.
There are consequences. It's called being dead! And there are also consequences for everyone who loved them. Or even knew them
That
passively.
idea of there being a consequence is not an idea which Source came up with. It's an idea which humans came up with. And it is an idea which is
Yeah, I
born
really
from
don't
the
believe you
attempt
speak for
of
Source,
humans
so
to
just
control
stop
one another.
saying that.
Really where you see the birth of the idea that there is suffering after death waiting for you as the result of suicide.
There's no suffering after death, okay? Because there's nothing after death. But you know where there is suffering? In this life. And you have people like Teal Swan encouraging you to kill yourself rather than to actually seek help. rather than to actually create a correct solution for your fucking brain to work with. That is not acceptable, okay? She would rather that maybe you just off yourself if you really think it's a good idea. This is the strongest surviving and the weakest failing. This is some predatorial, Darwinian bullshit.
From the early Christian Roman era. What was happening at that point basically is that
nobody listened to her for spiritual advice, please.
In the government.
Oh, and by the way, let's just take a look here at her description on this video. I'm seeing a similarity to some videos from Billy D. I'm seeing quite a similar little description. I wonder who might have inspired Billy D to become a gay shaman. Who? Who could it have been?
Also, the religions began to tell people that they needed to start to conform. This is just the human power dynamic. Whenever you tell somebody you need to conform, they're basically saying that what you think is right for them is better than what they think is right for them. And when people start to...
That's true. If what you think is right for yourself is to kill yourself, then yes. Other people may have a more rational and reasonable solution to your problems. And I feel bad for the families of all these people who listen to you, who were preyed upon by psychic vampire like you. Because it's really tragic that people have ended their own lives over some really shitty advice that you gave out without even thinking twice about it, to fill up some fucking watch time on your goddamn channel analytics.
Follow conformity, they begin to suffer. And so then you watch this thing where the churches came up with the idea
to sell some merchandise.
That life is about suffering and that all of your reward happens after death. And when people started hearing that, after, of course, ironically being taxed, what was happening in these countries at this time is there's a lot of taxation happening.
Yeah. And you know what? We've seen enough. I've seen more than enough of your disgusting, disturbing video to know what you are. But at least we have a good primer for the next Teal Swan video, okay, guys? And I just want you to know that this person is a truly sick individual to be telling suicidal people that killing themselves is maybe something they should consider. That's not right, okay? It's really horrific. So we're going to move on, okay? And I want you to know she's not a retard. She's not a retard at all. That might be the scariest thing about her. I'll see you guys on the other side of the break.